The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to the OptiTex webinar. We will begin in about 4 minutes, just waiting for a few more people to log in. Hello, welcome to OptiTech's 015.5 Technical Review. Today I'm going to be going over OptiTech's PDS grading and 3D. I will be showing you the best practices, workflows, and of course highlighting all of the new features and practices that's in the software now. There have been so many new dynamic changes that affect other ways you've been working. So I find this as an opportunity to really give you an idea of how to streamline what you're doing now and learn more about tools that you may not have worked with before. I'm Julia Shaw. I'm the Global Enablement Manager, and I will be performing this webinar with you today. Now, there's just a little bit of logistics I'd like to cover with you first. You will notice a question panel. And so 2 times during this webinar, I will glance over and look at your questions and give you some live answers. So please feel free to chat with me. If we can't get to all of your questions during the webinar, they will certainly be answered. Stay on the line after the webinar and we'll make sure to answer them for you. So let's begin. We're going to spend a lot of our time inside the software today. So the first thing you might want to do is take a print screen, as these are the main highlighted tools that I will be featuring and showing today as the new way of, as the new features that we have here in OptiTex. So I'll just pause on this screen to let you take a print screen. Now, of course, we do have links which list in detail all of the new features that have been released in 15.3 and our current release 15.5. And at the end of the webinar, I will introduce you to our new website and our new help page to help you negotiate through. Okay, so first of all, I really want to talk about your best practices for working in OptiTex. Very often when I am doing support or communicating, I see so many different users use so many different techniques. And I really want to try and bring them all together so everyone can benefit from what I've learned. Let's jump into the software. So when you first open up OptiTex, your screen looks like this. The very first thing to do is to set up your software. So I'm just going to reset my layout, and this is how the screen will look if you have 3D. Let's set it up for 2D now. The first thing I want to do is make sure my track lines are turned on so that the entire time I'm working I can track my progress. In OptiTex, it's also important to set up your preferences as you would like. And here I'm going to highlight some of the new preferences that we have that really help many tools work more efficiently. First of all, under the main display, make sure that you check our new Show Grading control line so that you can see all the sizes clearly marked. You can also now change your left to right and right selection mode and how it performs. As you remember in OptiTex, if you drag from the right to the left, any part of the piece that is touched gets selected. But if you drag from the left to the right, only pieces you surround get selected. Also, you can work with our new Show Drafting Contour Length. This is very important because now when you're drafting, you can see your line lengths as you go. So for example, if I wanted to draft a new line on my pattern, I can press the drafting line and notice by my mouse it's telling me the length that I'm going. I pressed F2 to complete the line and I can double right click. To finish going through the new preferences, I also like to go into my bold mark and check that so that I can see exactly where my mouse is about to enter in a new information. Next, I'm going to go to my draft and make sure to answer these two questions so that you do not have to keep pressing enter and you can draft much more efficiently. Next, I'm going to go to the notch folder, and I like to make sure to check add a grade point when creating a new notch. It makes it much easier to grade the notch and manipulate the notch when there's a grade point attached. And finally, I'm going to go into color. Here in color, I like to make sure to check highlight a selected segment and control the color of that selected segment. So I like everything to be red in my example. That way it's very easy to see. Once I have all those preferences set up, then I can arrange my work area. Down at the bottom, you'll notice we have these 3 new black and white buttons. I like to have the first 3 turned on so that the whole time I'm working, I can always view track lines to assist me in moving and balancing my pattern. In addition, I like to be able to drag down guidelines to make sure that my pattern to make sure I can spec out or measure my pattern. Guidelines have been updated, so when I double click on a guideline, I can now enter in a movement that I want and then click apply, and it will move that distance. I can continue to do that without closing the menu to view and move the guideline. Don't forget, you can shift click on a guideline to rotate it 90 degrees, or you can double click on it, click the little arrow, and select any 2 points, and the guideline will follow along on that path. Guidelines can then be hidden, or you can click on them and delete them. Let's now talk about the next step in the workflow. So in OptiText, you can bring in your pattern as you remember by digitizing or by importing. The importing menu has been updated just to fix different types of problems that we've had with importing. But one key point you should remember is when you are importing a pattern, to make sure that you choose AAMA. That's true 99.9% of the time, regardless of the extension of the pattern. I'm now going to take this pattern and export it into a DXF format. I select AAMA, but then I make sure to save my type as DXF. Most other vendors require a DXF extension. And I'll choose all my pieces. Now let's import that pattern. Again, I make sure I'm choosing AAMA, and I'll import the pattern. When you import a pattern, sometimes it will also ask for a grade rule. It knows the name of that grade rule from the file. You cannot choose a different grade rule. And here's a standard pattern. Now the next group of actions I'm going to do are how to clean up a pattern. So some of the main features and tools that you need to learn in OptiText. I say there's a handful of them are the most popular, but we've discovered a couple new ones that I would like to introduce you to. First of all, when you right-click, you have your traditional select tool, so that if you want to select a line, you can click, drag, and release. But now we have a new right-click tool called Select Segment Tool. Here you can click right on a line and it will select that tool. And if you want to keep selecting, you can either hold the Shift key down, and now I've selected that line just with one click. A pattern such as this, a DXF pattern, doesn't know about its darts or pleats or mirrored pieces. So I can easily go into my toolbox, darts, and turn any line marking a dart into a dart. You can hold your Shift key down if you find that the dart point isn't accurate and you'd like to click on it, or without your Shift key, it will automatically snap. Now I can select those two lines and delete them. I can even delete that extra drill hole. So here I'd like to highlight a new tool in version 15, which is called Close and Reopen Dart. With this tool, you can click on the dart tip and then just click anywhere else, and it will automatically close the dart and open it on the other side. This is a very accurate way to do that so that you can zoom in and perhaps clean up this line. Then when you're done, you Shift click and the dart will go back to where it was with the changes that you've made. Do not confuse this with the older tool, which was just Close Dart and Reopen Dart. The next tool I'd like to introduce you to is a new tool we have. You might have known that as point-to-point fold, but now we have a new tool called Fold onto Point. This is a much better tool for doing a variety of things. First of all, if you want to fold onto a point, you now can go either direction, clockwise or counterclockwise. Before, it would always only open on the same side. But in addition, if you have a shoulder that is pulled forward and you're trying to figure out how to draft this pattern to have a pulled forward shoulder, you can now fold point to point between two different pieces. And it will automatically create that turn for you. Now again, let's talk about the workflow. When I'm bringing a pattern, I may need to add or subtract seam allowance from that pattern. And again, we have new tools for that. So I'm going to click on the seam folder, and then I'm going to click on Basic Seam. With Basic Seam, I can add seam allowances to all the pieces at one time, and I will add a negative seam allowance if I need to mark it on the inside and a positive on the outside. And now I've added seam allowance on everything. But my next step now would be to go to this new feature called Seam Segment. Here, I can actually now make a box across multiple pieces. For example, if I would like to change the seam allowance on the bottom. So let's say we would like to have a 1-inch hem, and it will change all the patterns to 1 inch. Third, I can go in and choose Seam Segment and just click on a line, for example here, and it will automatically add 1 inch up to the next grade point. So Seam Segment lets you make a box or click on a point. And then lastly, if you need to get more specific, such as a kick pleat, I will then go to the Seam tool. And here's where I can enter in anywhere on a point, a certain distance, to another point, a certain distance, and then I could add a seam allowance there. This, of course, can also be done here on the center front, and I can make that a 0 seam allowance. Another new tool is the ability, if you're making a lining for a piece, to select all your pieces that are going to have the lining. And even though they have different seam allowance around there, we've created a new tool that allows you to automatically create linings for a piece. So I can select seam and then adjust seam value for a lining. And there are many options in here depending on what you need. So I'm going to reduce the seam allowance by 1/4 inch all the way around. So it respected the seam values that I had listed already, but it made a lining piece for me. Now I'm going to open up a different file, and we're going to go through some of our new pleating features. So let's zoom up on this pattern before we're going to draft it. Some of the main tools that you want to use under movement, of course, are move point. But look at how this has changed. If I press F8, I can see my line lengths. I already have my drafting line. So when I go to click and move this point, notice in turquoise, it's telling me my new line length automatically for me. So I can easily move a point. With the same tool, I can click on an existing line and edit it with same move point. I can also show my curve points by pressing Shift 0, and now I can come in and use Move Proportional. And with this tool, I can have more control over exactly which part of the pattern that I would like to select. If I zoom in close, you'll notice that I have several lines darting off of my piece for drafting. And then, of course, I can move it a certain distance and confirm its location. Some highlighted hotkeys. When you're drafting, I can click on the line where I want to draft. I will receive a little plus button. And notice I'm in drafting, and yet I was able to press F8 and Shift 0 to hide my line lengths and my curve points. So don't forget, you can be zooming or in any tool to do any function. Let's begin drafting. When I click on the edge of the point to draft, I have the opportunity to do the following. If I press period, I'm locked horizontal. Shift period, I'm locked vertical. Control period, I'm free. If I press comma, I'm perpendicular. And shift comma, and I'm perpendicular. Let's highlight another tool. Here and on this pattern, we have pleats. You'll notice that we've very much improved the pleat markings that we're working with. So when you double click on a pleat, I can enter in a new amount for that pleat, and I can control how it's marked and see an arrow showing me which way the pleat is folding. This can also be used and plotted out from your plotter, so you can have all your pleats marked that way too. Let's go back to drafting. One tool that you have when you're drafting is you can click on a line and use the Shift key to get a curve point. Now you can right-click and you have three new tools. You can create an arc or a circle while you're drafting. So maybe I want to create a perfect circle or make a perfect highlighted half circle during my drafting. So a scalloped edge becomes so simple. Just click the same amount that you want to go, and then right-click and add your circle. Double right-click, of course, to complete the line. We have a new feature that helps you with internal lines. So I'm going to draft an internal line. Now I can press I for internal, click to pick up the line, right-click, and I can pre-flip it horizontally, vertically, or I can go right into rotate mode, all before I place the moved internal back down. This is particularly important when you're trying to pick up a whole group of lines on one pattern, flip them, and place them on another pattern. We also have a new tool called Remove Access. What's good about this tool is that I can go into, if I need to pinch out a particular distance, I can fold out that amount. You're probably already familiar with being able to click Add Fullness, click on a point where you would like to take away fullness and where you would like it to come from. And then, of course, you can type a negative number, either counterclockwise or clockwise. Let's take out a 1/4 inch. And it will automatically fold that pattern down and take out a 1/4 inch for me. And you can see confirmation on what happened by the track lines. Now, in the last tool I want to show you, of course, is Multi-Move. With this tool, I have the ability to work on multiple pieces. If I make a box and hold my Shift key down, it will automatically pop up my movement box. Or if I don't hold the Shift key down, then it will prompt me to click 2 more times to click in the direction that I want to go. Or if I hold my Control key down, then I have the opportunity to make additional selections before I finish doing Multi-Move. And then, of course, I can complete that section by clicking and typing in the amount. We also have the ability, for example, if I needed to mark these original buttons, or I needed to mark a series of marks along a line all at once. So under Design, Add Relative, Add Point or Notch, we now have this new menu that allows me to add points separated by commas. So I can have a point at 1 inch, at 2.5 inches, and at 1 more inch. And that, of course, can be done by absolute distance or by relative. Now let's talk about some grading features. Some of our new grading features are pretty much a game changer, and that is our new tool called Set Grading. So here it is on the second row. Now in the past, of course, you click on a point, you can do equal all, you can copy paste points, you have lots of options on how you want to grade. But with Set Grading, this allows you to grade across multiple pieces, multiple times. Let's zoom up on this skirt, for example. And I'm going to flip this skirt over. And let's remove the grading. Now I'm going to go into my Set Grading tool. And I'm going to grade across all my circumferences at once. I don't have to worry about negative or positive. I'm just going to put in, for example, a 1/4 inch growth. It will automatically flip the grading for me because I have Paste Relatively button in the grading menu pressed. Now maybe I want to have some lift at the top. So I'll make a box right here across the top of the pattern. And in this area, I want 1/8 of an inch growth, but only in the Y. And finally, I could put in my hem. And let's say we're going to get a whole inch growth in the hem, and again, only in the Y. So in a matter of seconds, I can now grade a pattern out without having to click and type or even copy and paste on each point. I'm going to zoom up now on the grading, and you'll notice my new grading control line, which helps me see the length of my pattern. Now, what about stacking? That's a common thing that you need to do. And on pieces like sleeves, sometimes it's difficult to get back this stacking that you had. So we have several new tools to teach you how to work on that. Here I can go to Grading, Stack, and I can stack on a point. I can also click on a point, the icon in my grading menu, and stack on that point. Now I notice that my grain line is off grain, and that's a good thing if I wanted to get the sleeve back to where it was. So I can click on the grain line and go back to stack and ask it to stack by that baseline. And now I know my stack is back. But we've also allowed you to store your stack no matter what you do and not have to rely on the grain line. So I can actually ask it to clear that stack data. I could stack it on a different point altogether. Then I could go back and ask it to restore my stack back to how it was in the beginning. So no longer will you ever have to worry about a pattern restacking it for building. You can always restore back to the original. Finally, to end the 2D updates, we have new seam tools. So under seam, we have several new seam tools. Let's run down here on another pattern. And here I'm going to add my basic seam. So the new seam tools that we have, you can now create a round seam corner and just type in a radius. You can create an arc seam and a wave seam. We also have a new feature, convert internal to seam, so that's very convenient if you import a DXF pattern and you need that internal line to become the seam allowance. Let's move now into some of the highlights for 3D. There's been quite a bit of updates for 3D. Most importantly, the ability that we support all pleats. So I can place a pattern around I can make a pleat on the pattern and it will show up as a pleat inside OptiTex, as you can see. If I were to change this pleat, I can control exactly how it should be stitched. So once you click on a pleat, you have a whole new menu of 2D and 3D attributes. I can control if it's creased and folded, or if it's just pleated at the waist. I can control if it's going to be stitched down. So perhaps at a certain location on the pleat, I'd like it to be stitched down 10%. Notice the red markings on the pleat, and then this will automatically show up here in the 3D stitched down. One of the truly amazing parts of what's new is our ability now to do what we call dynamic updates. So with the old 3D, any change that you made, you needed to remove the clothing off of the model and then place it back on the model to see that update. And this would be whether you were working with adding a color, adding a stitch, anything that you did. So now, if you add a rigid part, edit your pattern, change its setting in the 3D property window, it will automatically update in the 2D window. So I'm going to ignore my sleeve, for example, and then the sleeve will disappear from the 3D window. Notice in the 3D toolbar we have this new button here, continuously perform the 2D and 3D updates. You even have the option of turning that off temporarily if you're about to perform many different actions at once in 2D. Then once you've done that, you can automatically update it all at one stop. So for example, let's say I want to shorten this skirt. I'm going to press Shift P for extend and parallel, select the end of that skirt, and shorten it by 2 inches. I'm going to now do that to the back. Now that I'm done, I can click Update Now, and it will automatically update that in the 3D window. Let's now review some of the other new features we have in 3D. So we have a special feature that deals specifically with collars. I'm going to use an example from our sample pack. Make sure to always install your sample pack because we've updated all of the 3D parts in the sample pack. You now have fur, more stitches, button stitches and buttonholes all combined together. So when you do update the software, it's important to also install the sample pack. So let's open up one of our blouses. And take a look at our new collar option. So now when you're going to stitch a collar, you can select on the piece, double click on the collar stand, and ensure that it knows its piece orientation, whichever is the active side. So this would be the left side. Next, I can go to 3D, and I can choose collar stand. But for the percentage, I can increase that to 104% so that it will immediately cross over the pattern. And I can choose whether it should be above or below itself. So I'm going to place that piece, those pieces in here, and I've ignored the upper collar. So let's take a look at that grid view, and you can see that the collar automatically overlaps itself. This comes out with such a much better result than before. The speed with which the file drapes has been sped up significantly, and this also is in tune with two new features that let you refine the cloth, which lowers the resolution, and simplify the cloth, which increases the resolution. That way you can drape really quickly to get the pattern on, refine it, and drape more. I'm going to pause this, and let's take a look at our view. Then I can select Refine Cloth, and you will notice that all of the mesh will get much smaller, and I can then get the tiny details if there's shearing or small details that you want to highlight. And of course, if you simplify, it will go in the reverse direction. Now let's take a look at our upper collar. Prior to this, collars seemed to be challenging to perform in 3D because it was hard to get a nice roll line and have it look very good. So first of all, you need to orient your collar this way, not this way and not upside down, but this way. Next, you create a parallel line indicating your roll line. It doesn't have to be a parallel line, but any parallel line that you can create to show your roll line. I'm going to create a very small one as this is like a standard shirt. Then I can click on that line and choose collar folded. And it will ask me, do I want to make this my roll line? And I say yes. Now what did it do? Well, it added a stitch there for me. When I go into the 3D stitch menu on the left, you'll see that it automatically checked fold line. It automatically gave it an angle and told it it was to fold out. And it did a new thing called corner radius. So let's take a look at what corner radius is. I'm going to unignore the collar. Even though this shirt is already draped, I can do that. I notice I can't click Update Now anymore, but I can click Place Cloth, which will reactivate Update Now, and then I can hit Update Now, and my collar will pop in. So you can actually drape into completion part of the garment and then later add additional parts to the garment, such as a hood. And let's take a look at our new collar now. And you'll see that you have very nice high resolution around that corner. So you can imagine that you can use this fold line, corner radius, for lapels, for any kind of roll that you want. It makes it much easier to do more fuller, drapier garments. And finally, we have fold to self. This is especially nice with lapels because it will fold back on itself. Fold to self has a dual function because now instead of cutting your pieces in half, such as waistbands and cuffs, you can just draw a line down the center and fold them to themselves. So you're actually really folding that pattern for real. And obviously the more realistic you can sew your pattern, the more realistic the pattern will be. And let's just continue draping now, and it will place the collar onto that shirt. The next thing I want to cover, of course, let's choose a different type of material for this. I'll choose a plaid. Notice that I can be choosing plaids and doing these kinds of things even while the simulation is in progress. Now, this pattern shares one shader, but I can come in and press my pattern move tool, and as I move the pattern, you'll notice all of the pieces move. But if I press my Alt key down, I can pattern match without having to create a separate shader for every single tool. Let's reopen the pleated dress, and I want to talk about our new PR3D and online digital collection. So let's place this pattern onto this dress onto the model and simulate it. Now, while that's simulating, over on the left, I have my shader manager. And here I can choose a shader type. This means the type of fabric it wants. That way when you do HQR or PR3D, that's what gives it the most realistic look. Here we have all kinds of shaders, from tweeds to fleece to satin, plain rib, jersey knit, lycra, linen, leather, and we're trying to cover everything. I especially like to highlight that we have metallic, gold, silver, or any metallic color that you want to, for zippers, buttons, and those kinds of things. I can also then, of course, choose a particular print or color on top of that selection. I'm now going to hide the model, and let's zoom up and take a look. Now this is just a plain print. The dress looks very nice, but it doesn't have that realistic final finish. We have our traditional HQR, so when I press on this, you will notice it will apply all of the textures that I requested, including my silver metallic rose belt and buttons. And when I zoom up real close, you can see that satin texture. Now, let's turn off HQR and work with our brand new photorealistic 3D. Traditionally, you would need to export a pattern into a fancy software such as Maya or some type of rendering software and spend several hours and, of course, have an expert trying to make a garment look realistic. But now we've implemented photorealistic 3D. I can click on it, and we have Enhanced we have a regular and an enhanced version, and it renders that garment. Notice as I change the view, it has to re-render each look. So what we've done is we've created a snapshot tool that will allow you to create your own 360 images rendered on every view. Those images can then be uploaded. So here I can take a high-end image or a 360 image. I can control the size and of course choose how many images, 18 or 36, and of course if I want an enhanced or standard image. Then depending on the speed of my computer, I can click name the file, of course, choose a folder, and this will be my 360 view. And apply. Then you will notice that it will begin creating those individual 360 images fully rendered in a matter of minutes. Once that's completed, I can go to OCloud in the upper left-hand corner and upload that to our new digital collection. Here we have our digital collection. Within this environment, you have the option to create your own categories. We have an admin console that allows you to control users and what they can see. And you can also filter throughout all of your work. So on the left side, I can filter by dresses and just view my dresses. And once I've uploaded my image, it will then be ready for me. I can choose either a 360 or even create an album containing multiple different colors and styles in different views. Or I can upload all 360s, and now I'll be able to turn and rotate this garment as I like. And I can stop at any view and of course zoom in. This is how a lot of our creations were made, and you'll notice that when you click on something such as this jacket, it's very difficult to tell that's not a real garment. Now, at this point, I'm going to pause and take a look at some of the questions that you've asked me. So, one of the questions you asked me, with OCloud, the OCloud feature works together with the 3D, but with OCloud, you can upload any image here. You could even upload a non-photorealistic image, such as just an HQR image. Depending on what you design, that may be enough. So even if I just do a regular HQR of this dress, I'm turning off photorealistic, turning on HQR, I can still go right here and take that 360 and all of those images just as I want. Another question I received is updating OptiText software. Well, that brings me to another topic so that I can introduce you to our new help menu. So we did create a new resources for our help menu, and we're reorganizing this new page as our new workflow. But by all means, that doesn't take out the need for our old help page. So within the software, I can click here on help, and that will take me right to my help page. There's always a section called Release Notes, and here you can see details of everything I've been showing you today, listed out clearly and categorized. We automatically send out emails to the owner of the accounts or whoever's in our database when a new release comes out. If you have not received the new 15.5 release, please feel free to email us at support.usa@optitex.com for that link. Remember to install the 64-bit version, and also remember to always install your sample pack, even if you're not working in 3D. But let's take a look at how you can work with this new website. Under the Getting to Know Pattern Making Suite section, here we have lessons on the entire work user interface for new users. And under Using PDS Functions, we have much more specific tools to teach you. Often, some of these tools will also have subcategories and or a video that goes with it. We also highlight with videos new features here. Now I'm going to go back to the main page of the help site, and here on the first page you see where I can click here for access to our existing help site. And the best way to use this particular help site is to navigate for the tool you're looking for, or in the left-hand corner to search for it. So I can click on my main page and easily see my list of menus, toolbars, and toolboxes. Then click on a tool and find a new feature. The current released version that I'm showing today, again, I'm answering some of your questions, is 15.5.561. This is the current release, and you can get that information by going to Help Optitex Online. I'm sorry, Help About Optitex. Now you're asking me about the pleated skirt, and I noticed that as well. When you open or close a pleat, you have to take care. So here's that front. I'm going to double click on this second pleat here, and I'm going to change it from a 3/4 inch pleat to a 1/2 a pleat. Now that pleat's smaller, and now I'm going to ask it to update now. And now I have that smaller pleat. When I shortened the pleat earlier, I messed up the width of the pleat at the bottom. And I think that's why the pleat's updated incorrectly. The next question I have is, does the simulation consider the seam allowance? Now, of course, you want to make sure that you are stitching on your sew line, not on your cut line. But this pattern didn't have any seam allowance on it. It wasn't marked. I'm going to add a 1/2 inch right now. So now this pattern has seam allowance around it. There. But you'll notice that in the 3D, it does not show those seams. What we do to understand what a seam allowance would do and that extra force is on each stitch we have a stitch constraint, which applies force to that seam. That way it will mimic a flat fell seam or a serged stitch in order to have the most realistic seam. I have a question about models now. Let me remove the dress from the model, and let's take a look at the model properties. Building a model is not just about entering in lengths and circumferences. You're actually trying to grow the model and build it not only lengths and circumferences, but shapes. So it's important to see the front, side, and back view of your model. And step one is always to work in the basic folder to build her. In OptiText, we have so many different measurements controlling, for example, the circumference, but most particularly the length. So for example, our outseam controls our waist height, and that's measured from waist to floor. Our inseam controls our inseam height, and that's measured from crotch to floor. So when you want to measure a torso or control your torso lengths, you already have other morphs that affect and control the torso. So for a torso measurement, you can take any additional measurement on the model, and I always save a copy with my model and all her measurements so that if I need to edit her, I don't have to keep taking this measure. So get her on a nice angle. I like to select circumference. Then I can use my ruler to measure from her collarbone to midway between her legs. Move that out and press. Now I want you to notice something. If you'll see that bar running along her body, so I have access to all those measurements against her or perfectly straight. I can shift-click on the little dot on the measurement to control how that measurement is taken and which one I want to look at. Then I can write down that number and do the same thing in the back and add those two numbers together. Again, it's important to put her on a nice angle to make it easy and to mark circumference so you can see where you want to measure from. In addition, you can add multiple circumference discs. I usually click several. I use the Shift key to position those discs at various locations. And I can control double click on a disc if I want to change anything about it, such as its angle or size. So if I want to maybe move this disc over for an arm measurement, just like moving pieces, I can use both mouse buttons to angle that. Control double click, change the size of that. Let's make it much smaller. And I usually call this my master model. Then I will save her and then remove all of the lines I've created and save again. The one that I distribute is the one, of course, that doesn't have any of the discs available. One of the questions is, can we do that with notches? And I think what you meant is that move point. I think what you meant was this new tool, design, add relative points or notches. So yes, you can ask it to add notches at different lengths separated by commas. Well, I want to thank everyone today for watching the webinar. If you hang in there, I will make sure to type back any answers that I didn't get to. But also now I would like to point out again where you can find your updated list. If you request from us the new links to the software, you will receive an email that looks like this. And it provides you with a detailed list. It provides you with a detailed list of everything that we have. So always take note about this button right here, Release Notes. Here you'll be able to view in detail what all of the new features are. As you scroll down, you'll find your 64-bit version to install. There are no more service packs that will install on top of what you currently have. You will not lose your settings. And of course, don't forget to install your sample pack. If you're working with some of our other features, such as our 2D viewer, our 3D viewer, or our 2D plugins, you can go ahead and install those as well. Take note, the new 3D viewer does support HQR. So if you save the file as a CLT, you can open that in Runway Viewer, and it will have its photorealistic or high-quality render on it. I want to thank you, everyone, for your attention and learning what all the new features are and intelligent and best new basics workflow for Optitex. If you stay on the line, I will make sure to answer any of the questions I didn't get to, and you'll be followed up with an email. This webinar will be available online, and I will show you that. If you go to our new website, optitex.com, in the upper right-hand corner, you see those 3 lines. This is our menu. And here you can click on Learn. And under Learn, we have free 3D patterns and, of course, all of our season's webinars. So again, thank you for attending the webinar. Take care.